Hello! I just wanted to do a little intro because the interview that I did with Dr. Oliver Robinson, who is a lecturer in psychology at the University of Greenwich, it just kind of like jumps right in and then jumps right out, so it needs a bit of like a little warm up and warm down. But yeah, I had the opportunity of meeting with Dr. Robinson and kind of asking him a few key questions about his quarter-life crisis and, you know, what advice he might be able to impart to anyone that is potentially in that same situation. They feel like they might be entering a quarter-life crisis or are in one. And yeah, it was so cool. I loved it. I'll just hook it up now. Hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much for letting me pick your brain very briefly. I know we probably have had a similar kind of crisis in terms of, we were talking earlier and you were saying that you had quite a drastic experience with it. Can you just kind of tell me about your experience of your quarter-life crisis?
Sure. So I was in the second half of my 20s. I was probably about 26 when it all got started.
Yeah.
And I was living in Clapham. I was working as a market research executive, and I was in a relationship. I was drinking quite a lot, living quite a conventional lifestyle. And then there was this sort of gradual rising in me when I realizing that a lot of what I was doing with my life was not a good match with me as a person, and my personality. And so I left the job and started a PhD, started writing a book at the time, which never got published, but it was all part of the crisis. And I moved to a new part of town, started playing the guitar, wrote some songs, started a band. But I would say for a good year at least was very emotionally all over the place.
Yeah.
You know, I felt unstable as well as being in the middle of a turning point.
Yeah.
But I'm so grateful for it. I felt like it was the making of me.
Yeah. I totally feel that as well, because like with mine, it was probably a slightly longer period. It's probably about 2 years of kind of feeling at the depths and then almost kind of having to hit that very bottom point to be able to get that trajectory back up and realise the life I was living wasn't actually my life. It didn't suit me.
Yeah, I remember feeling very down before I made the big changes, and I remember kind of that really sinking feeling.
Yeah.
And I was really looking for solutions as well. So I was reading a huge amount, trying to kind of find out about things that I thought would help me move forward.
Yeah. So I've actually investigated a little bit into your kind of research. And you say there's kind of two phases of, or two, what would you say, two options, two types of.
Yeah, I mean, so from the research that I've done and the interviews that I've done, I've discerned two main types of quarter-life crisis. Mm-hmm. The one that I experienced is what I would call the locked-in kind, where the crisis starts out when you've made a bunch of major commitments, at least one anyway, and you feel like you've sort of settled down into your adult life.
Yeah.
And then realize that actually you need to kind of make some major revisions and major changes. But initially you just feel locked into where you're at, and then you break out.
Yeah.
But the locked out kind, I think it's quite common after people leave school and university, where they try and get to where they want to get to, but they just can't even get the job. They can't get into the relationship, and they just feel isolated, stuck in their parents' house, unable to break into the world out there, and sort of still feel a bit like a kid. And that feeling of starting the crisis, feeling isolated and unable to get into where you want to get, that's the lockdown crisis.
And and from what you've kind of researched and experienced, would they have kind of very similar feelings once they've got to that crisis point? Their almost experience feels the same, that they know they need to make changes at that point.
So both, but at the core of both is the requirement to make changes.
Yeah.
And to realise that the challenge in front of them is to work out how to change their approach to their problems in order to come up with better solutions. Right. And yes, and both will feel down, they have self-esteem problems, they may feel very anxious at times. So there are definite similarities in both, of kind of feelings of feeling overwhelmed and feeling like a really important turning point in your life.
Cool, okay, that's really interesting. So, and you've also looked into the fact that there's kind of 4 phases, is that right?
Yeah.
Of the crisis. Can you just kind of brief me in?
Sure.
Because I just find all this stuff.
Yeah, so for the locked-in kind, phase 1 is what I call locked-in. So where the person who's in the crisis feels that they're stuck in a they've settled down, but they're stuck and they don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
And then phase 2 is where this is the separation phase, very emotional phase, very difficult phase, where they make some major changes and break the status quo. And then phase 3 can be quite an extended phase of experimentation and exploration and trying out new things and working out where to go next. And then phase 4 is essentially when the crisis is resolved and there's a sense of increasing closure over that phase of your life, that episode. Right. So and then there are also 4 phases in the locked out kind, which I call fired up. That's the first phase, where the person in question is enthusiastically trying to get to where they want to get to, and they're trying hard and they feel optimistic. But then phase 2 is where it's called locked out, and that's where they start to have repeated failures and they start to question whether they're ever going to get there, and things start to fall apart.
Right.
Phase 3 is called reflective pause in the locked out model, and it's where they pause in their attempts to work out what's going wrong. Why aren't they getting to where they want to get to? Is it something they're doing wrong with it? Is it that they chose the wrong goal in the first place? And that's the kind of quite experimental phase. Mm-hmm. And then there's also a resolution phase in the locked out kind. But crucial to that is that often where they end up after the crisis is not necessarily where they thought they would get to, and not necessarily where they were when it started. So it might be just that they realize that actually, in order to kind of make headway and make progress in their life, they need to kind of perhaps take a different path or not be quite so ambitious initially.
Yeah.
And I think that's partially because young people are kind of sold a message which is a good message, which is that, aim high, try hard, aim for the stars, it's all going to work out. But actually, when you start trying to break into to the realities of career and everything else that entails, all the kind of burdens and commitments of adult life, you have to accept there's a huge amount of compromise and kind of reality checking. Mm-hmm. And that what you end up getting is a mixture of what's out there, where you are, what you're capable of, luck, and so many other things. And
it's like a real tipping point, isn't it? That it's like a lot of things have to align for things to kind of be the happy ending, and you're not necessarily failing if you're not reaching that tipping point.
Absolutely, and the dream may be realised one day, but just it might not be quite as instantaneous as you hoped.
Yeah. So just obviously to wrap this up a little bit, I am interested to know what is your kind of biggest takeaway from your crisis. Ooh. In terms of like advice that you could give to someone that's kind of maybe just entering, maybe they're in the thick of it and they're kind of saying, give me some goddamn hope.
Yeah. So I would say don't ever fall for the idea that success is something that other people tell you about or define. You can only define success on your own terms. Yes. So you may look like a success to others, but feel inwardly like a failure if you're doing very well at a job that you hate.
Yeah.
And people may point at a person who, ostensibly is doing very well and go, oh, look at him or her, she's a success, whereas inwardly they feel like they're walking very fast down a path that they don't want to be on. So success is something that you must define on your own terms. That's my major takeaway, is that try and to a degree detach yourself from what convention or society or whatever you perceive other people think as a life well lived is, and work out what's going to be good for you and what is going to make you feel like you're getting up in the morning and spending your day on activities you genuinely think are meaningful.
Yeah. So that was my first foray into interviewing someone with about 4 or 5 minutes preparation. It was a total off-the-cuff kind of interview. So, I actually took a lot of value from it, and I hope you did too. I will see you soon. Goodbye.